Imagine walking through the heavy, ornate gates of the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. The air smells of jasmine and rosewater, the tiles glisten with intricate geometric patterns, and the silence is broken only by the splashing of fountains. To the outside world, this was a paradise on earth, a sanctuary of beauty, luxury, and the Sultan's divine pleasure. For centuries, Western artists painted this place as a sensual wonderland, a hedonistic playground filled with lounging women and endless delights. But if the walls of the harem could speak, they wouldn't whisper of romance. They would scream. Behind the silk curtains and gold-leafed doors lay a highly organized, brutal institution built on slavery, psychological warfare, and cold-blooded survival. The women here were not merely lovers, they were pawns in a high-stakes game where the prize was absolute power, and the penalty for failure was often death or total erasure. Today, we are peeling back the layers of history to expose the terrifying reality that the Ottoman Empire tried desperately to conceal. Contrary to the romanticized movies, women did not enter the harem by choice. The foundation of this institution was human trafficking on an imperial scale. Most of the women who ended up in the Sultan's private quarters were captured during military campaigns or raids by Crimean Tatars in Eastern Europe, the Caucasus, and Africa. They were the spoils of war. Imagine being a young girl in a Circassian or Georgian village, ripped away from your family, stripped of your name, and transported thousands of miles to a foreign land where you didn't speak the language. Upon arrival, these girls were inspected like livestock. Only the most beautiful and intelligent were selected for the harem. Their past lives were effectively deleted. They were given new Persian names like Gulbahar, Spring Rose, or Hurrem, the cheerful one, and forced to convert to Islam. This wasn't just a home, it was a prison where your identity was the first casualty. Once inside, the dream life was actually a rigorous, military-style boot camp. The harem was not a place of idleness, it was an intense educational institution. The new arrivals, known as asimiler, novices, were subjected to years of strict training. They had to learn Turkish, the complexities of court etiquette, musical instruments, sewing, and the art of conversation. The discipline was absolute. The harem was ruled by a strict hierarchy, and any deviation was punished severely. The Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother, sat at the top, and below her was a complex ladder of stewards and head treasurers. A girl could be beaten on the soles of her feet, bastonado, for simply speaking out of turn or failing to show proper deference. The pressure to be perfect was suffocating because perfection was the only ticket out of servitude. If you weren't chosen by the Sultan, you remained a servant to others for the rest of your life, scrubbing floors in a palace made of gold. Perhaps nothing illustrates the horror of the harem more than its guardians. To ensure the absolute sanctity of the Sultan's lineage, the harem was guarded exclusively by eunuchs, men who had been castrated. But this wasn't a simple procedure, it was a mutilation often performed without anesthesia and with high mortality rates. There was a stark racial division here. The black eunuchs, usually from Sudan or Ethiopia, underwent a total removal of their genitalia and guarded the inner sanctum, holding immense power as the only conduit between the women and the outside world. The white eunuchs, from the Balkans or Caucasus, usually had their testicles removed and handled administrative tasks outside the harem gates. These men were stripped of their manhood and their ability to have families of their own, forced to dedicate their entire existence to the Sultan. While some rose to great political power, becoming the Sultan's closest confidants, their lives were fundamentally defined by the physical trauma inflicted upon them as children. While the harem was a cage for women, it was a death trap for princes. In the early Ottoman period, the succession wasn't guaranteed to the eldest son. It went to whichever son was strongest, smartest, or had the most support. This led to brutal civil wars every time a sultan died. To stop this chaos, Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, codified a chilling law: whichever of my sons inherits the Sultan's throne, it is appropriate that he should kill his brothers for the order of the world. This wasn't a secret, it was state policy. When a new sultan was crowned, his first act was often to order the execution of all his brothers, including infants. Mute executioners were sent to strangle the princes with a silk bowstring. Spilling royal blood was forbidden. In one horrific instance in 1595, Sultan Mehmed III had 19 of his brothers executed in a single night. The next morning, 19 small coffins left the palace. The weeping of the mothers in the harem was said to be so loud it could be heard outside the palace walls. The public backlash against the mass murder of princes eventually led to a change in policy in the 17th century. Instead of killing their brothers, sultans began imprisoning them in the cafes, the cage. This was a set of apartments within the harem where potential heirs were kept under house arrest, completely isolated from the outside world. While this saved their lives, it often destroyed their minds. Princes would spend decades in the cage, constantly fearing that the executioners were coming for them. They had no political experience, no social interaction beyond a few sterile concubines and deaf-mute servants. When they were finally pulled out to become sultan, many were psychologically broken. Sultan Ibrahim the Mad, for example, had spent 22 years in the cage. When he ascended the throne, he was erratic and paranoid, famously ordering his entire harem of 280 women to be tied in weighted sacks and drowned in the Bosphorus because he suspected a conspiracy. In this cutthroat environment, women weren't just victims, they became master players of the game. The ultimate goal for any harem woman was to give birth to a son and ensure he became the next sultan. If she succeeded, she became the Valide Sultan, the most powerful woman in the empire. This period, known as the Sultanate of Women, saw figures like Hurrem Sultan and Kozum Sultan effectively ruling the empire through their sons and husbands. But this power came at a terrible cost. A mother had to constantly protect her son from assassination attempts, poison, and his own father's paranoia. It was a life of high-stakes chess where a single wrong move meant death. These women orchestrated political alliances, communicated with foreign leaders, and managed massive charitable foundations, all while never stepping foot outside the harem walls. Their power was immense, but it was entirely derived from their proximity to the throne. The harem was a breeding ground for intense jealousy and rivalry. With hundreds of women competing for the attention of one man, alliances were fragile, and betrayal was common. A favorite, Iqbal, who spent a night with the sultan instantly became a target for the others. Rumors, slander, and even poison were weapons used to eliminate rivals. If a concubine became pregnant, she had to be guarded night and day. Other women might try to cause a miscarriage to protect their own children's status. The hierarchy was brutal. If a sultan died, his favorites were often sent away to the old palace, Eski Saray, a gloomy retirement home where they lived out the rest of their days in obscurity. The fear of being discarded or replaced drove women to desperate measures to maintain their position and the favor of the sultan. We often hear about the princes who became sultans, but what about the others? The reproductive logistics of the harem were tightly controlled. Not every child born was allowed to live or be acknowledged. While sons were potential heirs, daughters were valuable political pawns to be married off to pashas and viziers to secure loyalty. However, unacknowledged pregnancies or children born to lower-ranking concubines were sometimes dealt with quietly. There are dark historical accounts suggesting that unauthorized pregnancies were terminated, or infants were removed immediately after birth. The lineage had to be kept pure and manageable. The harem was not a nursery, it was a dynasty factory. Any product that didn't meet the rigorous quality control standards of the imperial family was liable to disappear into the mists of history, leaving no record behind. The Ottoman Harem was a paradox, a place of breathtaking beauty that housed unimaginable suffering. It was a golden cage where the walls were lined with silk, but the doors were locked tight. From the mutilated eunuchs who guarded the gates to the princes losing their minds in the cafes, the cost of imperial power was paid in human blood and sanity. These truths remind us that history is rarely as romantic as the paintings suggest. The real story of the harem isn't about seduction, it's about survival in one of the most ruthless systems ever created. What part of the harem's history shocked you the most? Was it the tragic fate of the princes or the brutal life of the eunuchs? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you found this deep dive into history fascinating, Please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a journey into the dark corners of the past. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.